Reginald Wallace was 36 years old, made $56,000 a year as a lead mechanic for the Knoxville City Bus Depot, and he knew, with the kind of certainty that settled deep in your bones, that his marriage was over. The knowing wasn't a loud crash. It was a slow, creeping silence that had started in the bedroom and had now colonized the entire 1,400-square-foot house he'd inherited from his father. It was in the way his wife, Nia, no longer asked about his day, her eyes fixed on the gleaming screen of her $1,200 iPhone 14 Pro. It was in the way she placed her $2,400 Burberry trench coat on the hall chair, as if it were just visiting, not staying. The official end came not with a fight, but with a crisp, cream-colored envelope left on the polished surface of their $2,200 Crate and Barrel dining table. It was 7:13 p.m. on a Tuesday. Reginald had just walked in, the smell of diesel and industrial soap still clinging to his worn, $45 Dickies work shirt. His hands, scrubbed raw but permanently stained with grease in the creases of his knuckles, felt clumsy and huge as he picked up the envelope. It wasn't sealed. Inside, thick, expensive paper detailed the dissolution of his 8-year marriage, filed by one of the most expensive law firms in downtown Knoxville, a firm whose retainer alone was likely a quarter of his annual salary. He read the words, "Irreconcilable differences," and a hollow laugh escaped his lips. The differences were certainly there. They were in the $89 Timex on his wrist and the $4,500 Cartier watch on hers, a networking gift from her public relations firm. They were in his 2012 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles on it and her white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 lease he knew they couldn't truly afford. He had tried to keep up, to bridge the ever-widening gap between his world of hydraulics and engine blocks and her world of client dinners and branding strategies. But he was a mechanic, grounded and steady. Nia, it seemed, wanted to fly, and she had decided he was an anchor. He sank onto one of the dining chairs, the legal document feeling heavier than a transmission block in his hands. He was a good man, a steady man. He had never raised his voice, never been untrue, never failed to put her first, and for that, he was being served. He had no idea this was only the beginning, a polite opening salvo in a war he didn't even know was being waged against him. Have you ever felt like you were living in a different reality than the person sleeping next to you? It's a terrifying feeling, and Reginald was about to find out just how deep that chasm went. Let us know in the comments if you've ever been completely blindsided by someone you trusted. The house on Oakmont Drive wasn't just a house. It was Reginald's history, built with his father's hands and paid for with his mother's quiet sacrifices. When his father passed, the house came to him, mortgage-free. It was a simple 3-bedroom brick ranch, but it was solid. He remembered weekends spent under the hood of his dad's old Ford, the smell of cut grass and motor oil, his mother bringing them lemonade in a sweating glass pitcher. When he married Nia, he believed he was bringing her into that legacy of warmth and stability. For a while, it seemed to work. Their early years were a collage of domestic normalcy. He'd come home from the depot, and the first thing he'd do was start dinner. He found a rhythm in the kitchen, the methodical chopping of onions and garlic, a soothing counterpoint to the clang of wrenches and air compressors at work. He'd make her favorite, shrimp scampi, using a $15 bottle of white wine, while she sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone and recounting office politics. "Can you believe Brenda wore that to the pitch meeting?" she'd ask, not really waiting for an answer. He'd listen, nod, and stir the pasta. He filled the house with her desires, tangible proofs of his love. When she decided she was into juicing, he spent $400 on a top-of-the-line Breville juicer. It was used for 3 weeks before gathering dust on the counter. When the fitness craze hit her office, she had to have a Peloton. He took a small loan from the credit union to cover the $3,500 expense, watching with a tight chest as the delivery men set it up in the spare bedroom. She used it religiously for 2 months, her social media filled with sweaty selfies, before it became a very expensive clothes rack for her ever-growing collection of designer dresses. Their finances were a constant, quiet source of tension. His $56,000 salary was the bedrock, paying the property taxes, the utilities, the insurance on both cars. Her income, which fluctuated wildly based on commissions at her downtown PR firm, was for what she called the extras. The extras included a $600 monthly shopping habit at Nordstrom, weekly $150 dinners with her work friends at the Oliver Royale, and a standing $250 bi-weekly appointment at a high-end salon. He tried to talk to her about saving, about a joint account for the future. "Reggie, please," she'd said with a dismissive wave of her perfectly manicured hand. "You have to spend money to project success. It's an investment in my brand." He saw the condescension most clearly in the way she talked about his job. To her friends, he was in transportation. She never said bus mechanic. She'd gloss over it, quickly changing the subject to her latest successful campaign. He once overheard her on the phone with her Aunt Mavis. "It's fine, I guess. It's stable," she'd said, her voice dripping with a weary sort of pity. "But honestly, Mavis, how far can you get on 56 grand? I'm the one with the ambition here." He had been standing in the hallway, holding a new $30 air filter for the central unit, and the words had felt like a physical blow. He installed the filter in silence, the clean air pumping into the house feeling like a lie. The atmosphere was anything but clean. It was choked with resentment he was only just beginning to understand. He was a fixed cost in her life's ledger, a reliable utility, not a partner. And the value of his stock was plummeting. The cruelty began with a chilling politeness. A week after the papers were served, Nia agreed to meet at the house to discuss the division of their assets. Reginald had made coffee using the $250 Nespresso machine she'd insisted on, and set out 2 mugs. She didn't touch hers. She stood by the window, her arms crossed, her white BMW gleaming in the driveway behind her. "I'll be taking my car, obviously," she began, her tone transactional. "And my clothes, the Peloton, the artwork." She gestured to a series of abstract prints he'd never liked, which had cost a staggering $5,000. "And I want the house, Reginald." He felt the air leave his lungs. "Nia, this was my father's house. It's paid for. It's mine." "It's a marital asset," she said, the words sharp and clearly rehearsed. "We've lived here for 8 years. I've contributed. My lawyer says I have a strong claim." "Contributed what?" he asked, his voice quiet. "I pay the taxes. I fixed the roof last year. That was $6,000 out of my savings. I replaced the water heater." She laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Don't be so literal. I contributed to the value of the home. My presence, my style. This place was a dusty old bachelor pad before I got here. Now let's be adults. You can't afford to buy me out, so the cleanest thing is to sell it and split the proceeds." She looked at him, her eyes cold. "It's for the best. You can get a nice little apartment somewhere closer to the depot." The condescension was suffocating. A nice little apartment. As if his life's anchor was a temporary inconvenience, she was tidying up. He felt a slow burn of anger start in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. "We're not selling my father's house." Her face hardened. "We'll see what a judge has to say about that." A few days later, her Aunt Mavis appeared. Mavis was a woman who seemed to be perpetually clad in expensive, uncomfortable-looking clothing. Her face, a mask of pleasant disapproval. She and Nia sat at the dining room table, sorting through bank statements, speaking in hushed, urgent tones, as if Reginald weren't 20 feet away in the living room. He could hear snippets of their conversation. sharp and pointed. Not enough to just walk away with half, Mavis was saying, her voice a venomous whisper. He's been holding you back for years, baby girl. That mechanic's salary, it's an embarrassment. You need to secure your future. You need leverage. Nia's voice was softer but filled with a new kind of steel. What kind of leverage? Fault, Mavis hissed. You find fault. Adultery is best. It puts them on the back foot. A judge will look at a cheating husband and a devoted wife and, well, things tend to go the wife's way. Reginald froze. Adultery? He hadn't so much as looked at another woman since the day he met Nia. The accusation was so absurd, so completely fabricated, that he almost wanted to laugh, but the cold, calculating tone in Mavis's voice stopped him. This wasn't about truth. It was about strategy. The next time he saw Nia, the attack was direct. She cornered him in the kitchen, her phone in her hand. Who is she, Reginald? Who is who? He asked, genuinely confused. Don't play dumb with me, she snapped. You've been distant, sneaking around. I know you're seeing someone. Every Wednesday night you're gone for hours. Where do you go? He stared at her, his mind racing. Wednesday nights. He couldn't tell her. It was the one part of his life that was sacred. That was his alone. A quiet duty he performed without fanfare. It was a promise he had made, and it was not hers to know. I have things to do, Nia. Things to do, she mimicked, her voice dripping with scorn. Right. With her. Just admit it. It will make this whole process easier if you're just honest. It was a trap, and he saw it clearly. She wanted a confession to a crime he hadn't committed. There is no one else, he said, his voice flat and even. Her eyes narrowed. I'll find out, she promised. I will. The public humiliation came a week later. They had a mutual friend, Sarah, whose barbecue they had always attended as a couple. Reginald went alone, feeling awkward and exposed. He was trying to make small talk when Sarah's husband, Mark, pulled him aside with a pained expression. Hey, man, I'm sorry to hear what's going on, Mark said, looking at the ground. Nia told Sarah, well, she told her you were unfaithful. That's why she had to leave. The world tilted. Reginald looked across the manicured lawn and saw a circle of their friends, all looking at him with expressions of pity and judgment. Nia had poisoned the well. She wasn't just divorcing him, she was erasing him, rewriting their history to make him the villain. He felt a profound sense of isolation. He mumbled an excuse to Mark and left the party, the sound of laughter and cheerful music following him down the street like a mockery. The final escalation came in the form of a letter from her lawyer. It was a formal offer of settlement. In it, she demanded the house, 70% of their liquid assets, and 2 years of alimony at a rate of $2,000 a month. The letter cited his ongoing infidelity as the grounds for the unequal split. It was a declaration of war. He read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it on the table. The quiet, steady man who fixed buses and cooked scampi was gone. In his place was someone cold, focused, and ready to fight. He had been underestimated his entire life, and most painfully by his own wife. She had no idea what a man with nothing left to lose was capable of. She thought she was building a case. In reality, she was handing him the tools to dismantle her entire world. What is the cruelest thing someone can do during a breakup? Is it the lies? The financial demands? Or is it turning your friends against you? We want to hear your stories in the comments below. The rain hammered against the large window of the law office on a gray Tuesday afternoon at 3:47 p.m. The office of Ms. Eris Hayes was nothing like the one Nia had retained. It was on the second floor of a modest brick building, furnished with practical, sturdy wooden furniture that had seen years of use. There was no gleaming marble, no abstract art. The only decoration was a framed law degree from the University of Tennessee and a vibrant, flourishing snake plant in the corner. It was a place for work, not for show. Reginald sat opposite Miss Hayes, a formidable black woman in her 50s, with a sharp, intelligent gaze and hair styled in elegant silver locks. She exuded a sense of calm, unshakable competence that soothed his frayed nerves. He had spent the last 2 weeks in a state of quiet panic, but in her presence, he felt a flicker of hope. "Reginald," she said, her voice even and direct. "As part of the discovery process, we are entitled to any and all evidence the opposing party intends to present." Nia's attorney was reluctant. "But the law is the law. They sent this over by courier an hour ago." She slid a thick, spiral-bound document across the polished surface of her $800 oak desk. The cover was a glossy white with the logo of a local private investigation firm. The title read, "Surveillance Report, Subject Reginald Wallace." Reginald's hands felt cold and clammy. He reached for the report, his fingers trembling slightly. This was it. The leverage Mavis had spoken of. The proof of his non-existent affair. He braced himself for pages of fabricated lies, of doctored photos, of twisted truths designed to ruin him. He opened the cover. The first page was a photo of him, taken from a distance, getting into his 2012 Camry in the driveway of his own home. His shoulders were slumped. He looked tired. The timestamp read, Wednesday, 6:02 p.m. He flipped the page. Another photo. His car, parked in the sprawling lot of the Park West Medical Center. Timestamp, 6:14 p.m. He kept turning. Page after page contained grainy, long-lens photographs of him walking from his car to the side entrance of the building, the one marked Hospice Care Unit. The report was meticulously detailed, a dry, factual log of his movements for the past 4 Wednesdays. 6:15 p.m. Subject entered the east entrance of Park West Hospice Facility. 8:17 p.m. Subject exited the facility, appeared somber, was not accompanied. 8:28 p.m. Subject returned to his vehicle and departed. There were notes from the investigator, clinical and detached. Subject did not deviate from his route. No contact was observed with any unidentified individuals in the parking area. Subject's demeanor upon exiting was consistently subdued. He carried nothing in or out of the facility other than his keys. Reginald read every word. He saw his own quiet grief documented in the sterile language of a surveillance expert. He saw his weekly pilgrimage of love and duty laid bare as evidence for a crime he didn't commit. Nia had paid a man $4,200 to follow him, hoping for pictures of him sneaking into a cheap motel or meeting a woman in a clandestine bar. And what she got was this: a month's worth of proof that he was a devoted son, visiting his dying mother. A wave of emotion washed over him, so powerful it almost knocked the wind out of him. It was a strange cocktail of profound relief, bottomless sadness for his mother, and a cold, crystalline rage. Nia's suspicion was so absolute, her belief in his treachery so complete, that she had paid a stranger to stalk him. And in her desperate search for a flaw, she had stumbled upon the one part of his character that was unimpeachable. The part he had kept private, not out of shame, but out of a deep, protective love for his mother's dignity. He looked up at Miss Hayes. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, empathy maybe, or the grim satisfaction of a strategist who had just been handed the perfect weapon. "She doesn't know, does she?" Ms. Hayes asked softly. "She has no idea your mother is in hospice." Reginald shook his head, unable to speak. He had tried to tell Nia months ago that his mother, Eleanor, wasn't well, but she had been distracted, texting a client, and had just murmured, "Oh, that's a shame." without even looking up. He never brought it up again. He carried the burden alone. She hired an investigator to find dirt, Ms. Hayes continued, her voice hardening slightly. Instead, he documented your character. She paid $4,000 for a report that proves you are a good man, Reginald, and she just handed it to us. She tapped the glossy cover with a single, decisive finger. This is not leverage for her. This is the end of her case. The following Thursday at 5 p.m., Reginald was back in Ms. Hayes' office. The PI report sat in the center of the desk like a monument to Nia's folly. Ms. Hayes had her laptop open, displaying a spreadsheet. The atmosphere was no longer one of shock, but of quiet, methodical preparation. "All right, Reginald," she began, "all business. This report is our centerpiece, but we're going to build a fortress around it. We will leave no room for doubt, no opportunity for her to pivot or claim ignorance." She turned the laptop towards him. "First, financials. I've gone through the last 2 years of your bank statements and your joint credit card bills." The screen showed 2 columns. One was labeled Reginald Wallace Expenditures, and it was a short, modest list. Monthly transfers to savings, gas, groceries, a few small purchases from Home Depot. The other column, Nia Wallace Expenditures, scrolled on for pages. There was the $43,000 BMW lease, which was in both their names. The Nordstrom charges, averaging $600 a month. The $150 dinners, 3 or 4 times a month. Spa treatments, hair salons, a $1,800 weekend trip to Charleston with her friends that he hadn't even known about. She was projecting success, all right, Ms. Hayes said dryly, with your financial stability as her safety net. We will present this to the mediator to counter any claim of financial hardship on her part. She has a history of living well beyond her and your means. Next, she pulled out a folder. "The hospice," she said, her voice softening. "I took the liberty of contacting Park West. With your permission, I'd like to get 2 things. First, a complete record of your payments. Reginald had set up an automatic debit 18 months ago to cover the portion of his mother's care that insurance didn't. It was $1,500 every month, a significant portion of his take-home pay. It was why he never bought new clothes, why he packed his own lunch every day, why he drove a 12-year-old car." The total came to exactly $27,000. Ms. Hayes made a note. $27,000, she murmured. "That's a powerful number." "Second," she continued, "I'd like a letter from the hospice director. Nothing dramatic. Just a simple statement confirming that Eleanor Wallace has been a resident for 18 months, that she is in palliative care, and that you are her only regular visitor." Reginald nodded, a lump forming in his throat. The thought of his mother's quiet, lonely existence being used in a legal battle was painful, but he knew it was necessary. Then, Ms. Hayes leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "Now, the most important part, the strategy for mediation. It's scheduled for next Tuesday. Her attorney is aggressive and arrogant. He will come in strong, making accusations. He will try to paint you as a liar and a cheat. You, Reginald, will say nothing. You will not defend yourself. You will not get angry. You will sit there with what I call hospice receipt composure. You will be still. You will be calm. You will let him talk." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We will let them present their entire case. We will let them show the mediator their irrefutable proof. They will hand the mediator that PI report with a triumphant flourish. They will build their gallows, tie their own noose, and put it around their necks. And only then, when they have finished, will I stand up." She laid out the sequence. She would calmly accept the PI report as evidence. She would thank opposing counsel for providing such a clear timeline of her client's whereabouts. Then, she would present the corresponding evidence. The $27,000 in payments to Park West. The letter from the hospice director. She would read from the investigator's own notes. Subject appeared somber. She paid a man to document your grief, Reginald, and we are going to make her look at it. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity and its devastating potential. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. A quiet, undeniable truth that would unravel every lie Naya had told. For the first time in months, Reginald felt the ground beneath his feet again. It was solid. It was real. And he was ready. He was a mechanic. He knew how to take things apart, find the broken pieces, and put them back together the right way. And that's exactly what he was going to do to Nia's case. The week leading up to the mediation was the longest of Reginald's life. He was living a double life. On the outside, he went to work, his movements measured and calm as he diagnosed a faulty EGR valve on bus number 42 or replaced the brake pads on the 19. He ate his packed lunch, a turkey sandwich on wheat and an apple, in the quiet of the depot break room. But on the inside, a storm was raging. He was a coiled spring of tension, replaying Ms. Hayes's instructions in his head. Say nothing. Be still. Let them talk. Nia, sensing a shift in the wind perhaps, escalated her attempts to get a reaction. On Wednesday evening, his phone buzzed. It was a text from her. I know you think you can just ignore this, but you can't. My lawyer is very confident. You should really think about taking the settlement offer. It's the best you're going to get. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He wanted to type, I know about the PI. I know you followed me to my mother's deathbed. But he didn't. He took a deep breath, pictured Ms. Hayes's calm face, and typed back a single, neutral sentence. We can discuss everything on Tuesday. Her reply was almost instantaneous, laced with frustration. Fine. Be stubborn. But don't say I didn't warn you when you end up with nothing. He put the phone down and didn't look at it again. On Friday, he got a call from Nia's mother. She was a woman he had always tried to like, but who had always treated him with a polite but firm sense of disappointment, as if her daughter had settled for a reliable sedan when she deserved a sports car. Reginald, she said, her voice syrupy with false concern. Nia is just beside herself. This has been so hard on her. I do hope you're not planning to drag this out and make it ugly. A gentleman would know when to just give her what she wants. For her peace of mind? It was a coordinated attack, a pincer movement of emotional manipulation. He felt his jaw tighten. A gentleman. They were trying to use his own decency against him. I'm just following my lawyer's advice, Carol, he said, his voice level. I'm sure Nia is doing the same. He ended the call before she could reply. Each interaction was a test of his resolve. Each lie of omission felt like a small betrayal of his own honest nature, but he knew it was the only way. He was gathering his strength in the silence, letting their arrogance build. The hardest part was his visit to the hospice that Wednesday. He sat by his mother's bedside, holding her frail, cool hand. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. The room was quiet, save for the gentle beep of a monitor. He looked at her dear face, the lines of a long, hard life etched around her eyes and mouth, and felt a surge of protective anger so fierce it made him dizzy. Nia and Mavis, in their quest for a bigger settlement, for a house he didn't even want, were trampling on this sacred ground. They were trying to turn his private, painful duty into something sordid and shameful. He leaned close and whispered to his sleeping mother, I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry they're dragging you into this, but I promise you, I'm going to make it right. I'm going to protect what's ours. He sat there for his usual 2 hours, the investigator's words echoing in his mind. Subject appeared somber. Yes, he was somber. He was saying a long, slow goodbye to the most important woman in his life, and his wife thought he was on a date. The absurdity and the cruelty of it settled in his gut like a block of ice. He left the hospice that night not just as a grieving son, but as a man with a singular, unshakable purpose. Tuesday couldn't come soon enough. The mediation was scheduled for 10 a.m. in a neutral conference room in a downtown office building. The room was the definition of sterile: a long glass-top table, 12 uncomfortable black leather chairs, and a bland corporate painting of a sailboat on the wall. The air was thick with tension, and the faint smell of expensive perfume from the other side of the table. Reginald sat to the left of Ms. Hayes. He wore his best suit, a simple charcoal gray one that cost $300 from J.C. Penney, a quiet statement against the opulence he knew he would face. He kept his hands folded on the table, his posture straight, his gaze fixed on a point just past the mediator's head. He was a statue of composure. Across from them sat the enemy. Nia was dressed in an $1,800 cream-colored power suit, her face a mask of cool confidence. Beside her was her lawyer, a slick, silver-haired man named Arthur Vance, whose hand-stitched Brioni suit probably cost more than Reginald's car. And next to him, to Reginald's surprise and disgust, was Aunt Mavis, perched on her chair like a vulture, her eyes gleaming with avarice. She was there to witness the kill. The mediator, a tired-looking man named Mr. Chen, laid out the ground rules. Then he turned to Nia's side. "Mr. Vance, you may begin." Vance stood up, radiating smug self-assurance. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. We are here today because my client, Nia Wallace, has been grievously wronged. For months, her husband, Mr. Reginald Wallace, has been engaged in a pattern of deceit and infidelity, causing irreparable harm to the marital bond." He paced as he spoke, his $900 leather shoes clicking on the floor. "Mr. Wallace has been leading a double life. While my client was at home, believing she was in a committed marriage, he was sneaking out for clandestine meetings with another woman. He has lied, he has obfuscated, and he has shown no remorse." Reginald did not move. He did not flinch. He just breathed. In, out. "Normally," Vance continued, "proving adultery can be a messy, he said, she said affair. But in this case, we have something more. We have irrefutable, documented proof." He paused for dramatic effect, then picked up a familiar white spiral-bound report from the table. "My client, at great personal expense, some $4,200 to be exact, hired a licensed private investigator to follow her husband. This report details his movements. It contains photographs, timestamps, locations. It paints a very clear picture of his betrayal." He slid the report across the glass table to Mr. Chen. "We ask that you review this evidence. On the basis of this clear marital fault, we are asking for the marital home, appropriate alimony, and for Mr. Wallace to cover all legal fees." He sat down, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips. Nia looked at Reginald, her eyes glinting with victory. Mavis actually patted her hand. Mr. Chen picked up the report and began to page through it, his expression neutral. After a few moments, he looked up. "Ms. Hayes, your response?" Eris Hayes rose slowly, a picture of calm authority. She walked to the table, picked up the PI report, and carried it back to her seat. She spent a full minute silently leafing through the pages, letting the tension in the room build to an unbearable level. Vance started to look impatient. Nia shifted in her seat. Finally, Ms. Hayes looked up, first at the mediator, then at the opposing counsel. "Mr. Vance, thank you," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Thank you for this report. It is incredibly thorough. Your investigator has done an excellent job documenting my client's whereabouts for the past month." A look of confusion flickered across Vance's face. This was not the reaction he expected. "My client, Mr. Reginald Wallace, does not dispute a single fact in this report," Ms. Hayes continued. "He was, in fact, at the Park West Medical Center every Wednesday evening, precisely as documented. We find this report to be so accurate, so compelling, that we would like to enter it as our Exhibit A." The room went utterly silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Vance stared at her, his mouth slightly agape. Nia's confident smile faltered. Ms. Hayes placed the report on the table and put a folder down next to it. "And to supplement this excellent report, we would like to provide some clarifying context." She pulled out a stack of papers. "This is Exhibit B, bank statements from my client, showing automatic payments of $1,500 per month every month for the last 18 months, made out to Park West Hospice, a total of $27,000. She slid the statements to the mediator. Then she pulled out another document. "And this is Exhibit C, a letter from Dr. Anjali Sharma, the director of the Park West Hospice Care Unit." She cleared her throat and read aloud. "This letter is to confirm that Eleanor Wallace has been a patient in our facility since May of last year. Her condition is terminal. Her son, Reginald Wallace, is her sole next of kin and her only regular visitor. He comes every Wednesday without fail to sit with his mother." She let the words hang in the dead air of the room. "The other woman," Ms. Hayes said, her voice dropping to a near whisper as she stared directly at Nia. "The clandestine affair that you paid $4,200 to uncover was my client's dying mother." The color drained from Nia's face. She went from a confident cream to a pasty, sickly white. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Aunt Mavis looked like she'd been slapped, her eyes wide with horror and disbelief. Arthur Vance's professional swagger evaporated, replaced by the panicked look of a man who realized he had just walked his client off a cliff. "My client," Ms. Hayes concluded, her voice ringing with quiet power, "kept his mother's illness private to protect her dignity, a dignity you and your client attempted to strip mine for financial gain. Your claim of adultery is not just baseless, it is grotesque. It is a bad faith filing of the most appalling kind. We are asking not only for the dismissal of all your client's claims, but for her to be held responsible for every single cent of my client's legal fees, and we are asking that the court affirm that the house, an inheritance from Mr. Wallace's father, is his sole and separate property." She sat down. The silence that followed was absolute. Mr. Chen looked from the letter to Nia, his face a mask of profound disappointment and disgust. Nia finally found her voice, a strangled gasp. I didn't know." It was too little, too late. The truth, quiet and undeniable, had filled the room, and there was no space left for her lies. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The mediator, Mr. Chen, didn't even bother with further discussion. He took a 10-minute recess, during which Nia and her lawyer exchanged frantic, furious whispers, while Mavis stared into space, looking utterly defeated. When he returned, his judgment was swift and merciless. "Ms. Wallace," he said, his voice cold and devoid of any sympathy, "your actions are unconscionable. To use a private investigator to surveil your husband, only to discover he is engaged in an act of profound familial love and duty, and then to proceed with this baseless accusation. It is one of the most egregious abuses of the legal process I have ever witnessed." He ruled entirely in Reginald's favor. Nia's fault-based claim was denied with prejudice. The house on Oakmont Drive was affirmed as Reginald's sole and separate property, his inheritance untouched by her claims. All of her demands for assets and alimony were summarily rejected, and, in a final crushing blow, she was ordered to pay Reginald's full legal fees, which amounted to a staggering $8,500, due within 30 days. Her attempt to gain leverage had cost her everything. The consequences cascaded through her life like a row of falling dominoes. First, there was the financial ruin. She was forced to move out of the house within 2 weeks. Her only option was a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the edge of downtown Knoxville, with a monthly rent of $1,400. The security deposit and first month's rent wiped out most of her savings. The $8,500 payment to Ms. Hayes's firm gutted the rest. Suddenly, her $600 Nordstrom habit and $150 dinners were impossible luxuries. She was forced to sell some of her designer clothes and handbags on Poshmark just to make ends meet, each sale a bitter reminder of the lifestyle she had lost. Her relationship with Aunt Mavis, the architect of her downfall, shattered completely. The car ride from the mediation was filled with screaming accusations. Nia blamed Mavis for the terrible advice, for pushing her to be greedy. Mavis blamed Nia for not knowing her own husband's life. How could you be married to a man for 8 years and not know his mother was dying? Mavis shrieked. The fight ended with Nia ordering Mavis out of her life. The aunt who had promised to help her secure her future had instead secured her ruin. Arthur Vance, her high-priced lawyer, was humiliated. He had been made to look like an amateur, a fool who didn't do his basic due diligence. The story of the disastrous mediation quickly made the rounds in Knoxville's tight-knit legal community. His reputation for being a ruthless shark was replaced by one for being a reckless gambler who had blown up his own client's case. He quietly dropped Nia as a client, wanting nothing more to do with the mess. The social consequences were just as severe. The truth, as it often does, found its way out. Mark and Sarah, the friends from the barbecue, heard the real story and were horrified. They called Reginald to apologize profusely for ever doubting him. The circle of friends that Nia had so carefully cultivated, the ones she had poisoned against her husband, now saw her for what she was. Her calls went unanswered. Her invitations were ignored. She was ostracized, left alone with the consequences of her own cruelty. Her curated world of success and popularity collapsed into a lonely, $400 a month apartment filled with the ghosts of her bad decisions. She'd wanted to fly, but she had only learned how to fall. 6 months later, the house on Oakmont Drive was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was a peaceful quiet, a healing quiet. The autumn sun streamed through the living room windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The oppressive weight of Nia's ambition and resentment was gone, replaced by an atmosphere of gentle purpose. Reginald had converted the downstairs guest room, the one that had briefly housed the $3,500 Peloton, into a comfortable, sun-filled room for his mother. He had spent $2,500 of his own savings to have a wheelchair-accessible ramp built leading to the back porch, and had bought a state-of-the-art hospice bed. Eleanor Wallace was home. Her mind drifted in and out of clarity, but in her lucid moments, she would look around the room, at the familiar photos on the wall, and the view of the garden her husband had planted, and a soft smile would touch her lips. Reginald's life had found a new rhythm. He still went to the depot every day, the familiar weight of a wrench in his hand, a comforting anchor. But his evenings were different. He learned the quiet, intimate routines of a caregiver, preparing soft foods, administering medication, reading to her from the worn Bible that had sat on her nightstand for 50 years. It was hard, exhausting work, but it was meaningful. It was love in its purest form, an act of service given without expectation of return. One Saturday afternoon, as Reginald was weeding the garden, the 6-year-old girl from next door, a bright little black girl named Maya with her hair in 2 big puffs that bounced when she walked, came to the fence. "Mr. Reggie?" she asked, holding up a piece of construction paper. "I made this for you." He walked over and took the drawing. It was a picture of a little brick house, remarkably similar to his own. In front of the house were 2 figures drawn in brown crayon. One was tall, him, and the other was a woman sitting in a chair with wheels. Over their heads, Maya had drawn a big, smiling yellow sun. "That's you and your mama," she explained, pointing with a chubby finger. "You're taking care of her. My grandma says that makes you a good man." Reginald felt a familiar lump form in his throat. He looked from the simple, honest drawing to the little girl's earnest face. "Thank you, Maya," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is the best drawing I have ever seen." He took it inside and taped it to the refrigerator, right in the center. It was more valuable to him than any $5,000 piece of abstract art. He started something new. Every Wednesday evening, the time he used to spend at the hospice, he would set up a few chairs on his back porch. He invited a few other people from the neighborhood, a woman caring for her husband with Alzheimer's, a young man whose father had suffered a stroke. They called it the quiet hour. They didn't talk much, they just sat, drinking sweet tea from a glass pitcher, and watched the sunset. They shared the silent, heavy burden of caregiving, finding strength not in words, but in shared presence. It was his way of transforming his pain into a small beacon of community. We spend so much of our lives chasing things we are told to value: the bigger salary, the nicer car, the more impressive job title. We build facades of success, hoping they will make us happy. But true wealth isn't something you can put on a credit card or list on a resume. True wealth is a clean conscience. It's the quiet dignity of a promise kept. It's the warmth of a neighbor's kindness and the simple, profound love captured in a child's drawing. Reginald had lost a wife and a life he thought he knew, but in the wreckage, he had found himself. He was a bus mechanic. He was a caregiver. He was a good son. And for the first time in a very long time, he was at peace. Thank you for joining us on Love Beyond Pride. If Reginald's journey from betrayal to peace resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories about the quiet strength of the human heart. We all face battles, but it's our character that determines how we finish the fight.